Hello, everybody. Welcome into the College Countdown. I am your host, Josh Neighbors, here on this Monday, December 2nd, 2024. Following Rivalry Week, we have got a whole lot to get to because a lot happened this past weekend. Plenty of flag plantings, some coach firings, and some conference championships that have been set up. Make sure you all follow us on Twitter, at CCPodcastJN. I'm also at JoshNeighbors_. Like the video, sub to the channel, trying to build this thing out. Need your all's help to do it. Every single one of those subscriptions helps. Also, so does liking the video and also leaving your comments. So please do all of those things. Let's see. We're part of the Rogue Media Network. Got that taken care of. Yeah, so really weird weekend across the board in college football. Really a fun weekend across the board as well. You know, you had moments like Michigan beating Ohio State, and the result of that game really is that Ohio State won't have to play in the Big Ten championship game, probably still gets in, right? You also have Clemson losing to South Carolina, but Clemson still has a shot regardless because Syracuse takes care of business against Miami. So you've got a weird situation like that. The tie breaks the Big 12 just made all kinds of no sense at all, and so you end up with Iowa State and Arizona State. It's weird to me, you know, I think about that great season, the COVID year that Iowa State had. It feels like Matt Campbell's accomplished a lot, but man, a 10-win season for the Cyclones. This year it's the first 10-win season in program history. UNLV and Boise is basically a play-in game because Tulane lost to Memphis. So much happened in this weekend that was, crazy. And we had some coaches getting fired, obviously, too. We'll get to that. But the big thing from this weekend you have to hit on, obviously, is Michigan, Ohio State. And the stats, the numbers, they are striking. It was 4 red zone trips for Michigan that resulted in a total of 10 points, and it included the red zone turnover. You had 5 red zone trips for Ohio State that resulted in 10 points, and they missed some field goals. They had turnovers, all of that stuff. I thought I listened to Cover 3 the other day. They made a great point, and it really was true. Like, Ohio State and Ryan Day in particular, felt like he needed to make a point about running between the tackles to show everybody that, hey, Michigan might have beat us up front last year, but this year things have changed, right? Things are different. We're the better team up front. We'll push you around. And they had a lot of injuries up front, and so that did not manifest itself. And they were better on the outside of things. They were able to throw the ball and move the football that way, but they wanted to prove a point with running the football, and they were not able to prove that point at all. Once again, 13-10 lost the final score, but 26 carries for 77 yards. Longest of the day was a 17-yard carry by Quinshon Judkins. Passing game, I thought was pretty effective, right? Carnell Tate was effective. Ibuka, Jeremiah Smith, they didn't get him the ball a ton, was able to move it. Will Howard obviously was not excellent, but Davis Warren was worse, right? And it felt like for Michigan, the big key in this game was third down. They were 7 of 14 on third down. Is that great? No. But was that good enough to extend drives and keep the ball in their hands? Yes. They won the time of possession battle 33-35 to 26-25, right? And so, it was a game where the turnovers were even. And because of that, you'd think that Ohio State would win. And it was one of those where you're just kind of waiting for Ohio State, and they just weren't good enough. And offensively, they just weren't good enough. And Michigan's defense is still good enough to win because their offense was not great. Like, their offense didn't win them this game. Ohio State gave it away. And for me, I have been adamant about how good I think Ohio State's roster is. Those defensive ends are fantastic. Secondary is pretty good. They got good linebackers. Everything's pretty good for them. Wide receivers are good. Offensive line's hurting now, but they've got good skill position players as well. And I do, I'm a Will Howard guy. He's not played well in these big games. He needs to improve, obviously, but still, he's thrown nearly for 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 8 picks on the year. He's also run for 7 scores as well this year. So, 34 total touchdowns in the season. We know he's a good player. We know he's a championship caliber player from what we've seen. And it's crazy to think, Kyle McCord has gone to Syracuse and had the year that he has had, kind of a lesson maybe in not giving up on a guy too much, but still what Will Howard brings with them athletically, I think too, is still big. They've got a chance. Counting them out would be ridiculous, but man, Ryan Day is just getting in his own way, and you can tell how badly he wanted the game. That's a huge problem. And look, when I think about the college ball playoff race right now, At 2 losses, 10-2, they get in. Yeah, because if you look at the way that they've lost Ohio State, their 2 losses have come against Michigan by 3 and Oregon on the road by 1, right? And they've also got, that win over Penn State. Obviously, it's huge. They've got the 23-point win over Indiana. That is huge, and they really just dusted a lot of the other teams they played, save Nebraska. They've dusted basically everybody else on that schedule. So they'll be fine. They'll be in. But the big concern is that they just have not found that extra gear that they need to find. Maybe against Indiana a bit, but Indiana put them in some spots so they could, start succeeding. Their defense really came to play, and I thought their defense was what was most impressive in that game. So their defense has been bringing it. I mean, you look at these wins ever since the Oregon game, 17 points allowed, 13 points allowed, 0, 7, 15, and then 13. So they have been consistently great on defense. Their offense just needs to hold up their end of the bargain because they're losing some close games. And this is the first ranked defense in terms of points against in the country, right? But they're 17th in points for. It's great. That's good. But it feels like in their big games, and even Penn State included in this, scored 20 points. 31 against Oregon, good, but you lost the game. You also think about the game against Michigan, 10 points. So just not good enough in those places. And Ryan Day should be better. And I'm a Ryan Day guy. I'm a big believer that they should not fire Ryan Day. But, I mean, it's hard to argue in Ryan Day's favor right now when his teams keep playing like this. It really is. Maybe that time off will be a benefit for them. Maybe them playing or not playing, in the Big Ten championship game will be huge for them in the rematch with Oregon. But they will have to play that first round game. So we will see what happens for them. But Ryan Day, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that if he loses the first round playoff game that he is probably going to get fired because you can't keep losing to Michigan like this. And, the born on third base comment from Harbaugh, I know we laugh about it. Ryan Day's a really, really good coach, I think. But you're losing big games repeatedly, and it can't keep happening at Ohio State, especially because they know what kind of caliber coach they can get. So, I think we should 100% be tracking that. Also, we'll go all the way back to Friday night and that wonderful, wonderful, wonderful mess that we had between Georgia and Georgia Tech. Thought Georgia Tech got robbed here a bit. Thought the officiating was not great. That fumble was questionable. The targeting was missed. The massive hole was missed. Eventually, in overtime, you kind of just get to a point where you're run the dang ball. And Georgia eventually did run the dang ball. But, man, Georgia Tech, you got to feel for them. Brent Key's doing a great job there. This program, they fired Paul Johnson, and they've had a tough time getting back to where they want to be following Paul Johnson. But you look at their loss this year. They lost by 3 at Syracuse. They lost by 12 at Louisville. They lost by 18 at Notre Dame. They lost 21-6 at home against Virginia Tech. That's probably the worst loss on there. And they lost to Georgia in 8 overtimes. But they beat Miami. They beat NC State. They beat Florida State. They beat Carolina. I mean, they got some decent pelts. And I know Florida State's not very good, but that, we didn't really know that at the time. Some decent pelts on that wall for Georgia Tech. And they played a really good, they played so well this year. And this is one of those situations where we focus so much on the playoff race and everything like that. And I didn't give Michigan enough credit, but wins like that are great. And I'm saying more towards Georgia Tech because Michigan just won a title. They've gotten enough credit. Georgia Tech deserves a lot of credit, and they feel like they're re-arriving from where they were before. Is it still a harder school to get people into? Yes, because academically it is very, very challenging. Luckily, though, they're in Atlanta. Not a great part of Atlanta, but they're in Atlanta. Talent-rich area, power school. Brent Key's doing an excellent job there, and this was just a gut-wrenching game. In Georgia, it took them a while. We've seen this before, but they had to wake up. They had to wake up in this game. Carson Beck looked a lot better than he normally was, really on time in this game. And they were able to move the football all over the field. And the Georgia offense is at its best when it's not honing in on certain guys, but when they're able to spread that thing around. 4 catches for Cash Jones. Dominic Lovett had a really nice game. 2 touchdowns for him in this one. Lawson Lucky had 3. Broderick Robinson had 2 catches. And then, Urasek had 3. So, I mean, you got a lot of these guys, who are able to spread that ball around. Oscar Delp, they've gotten the ball. They're able to spread that thing out. They got a little lucky. They had 3 fumbles and only lost 1 of them in the game. So that was pretty big for them. But they, the one thing is Georgia likes to keep stuff in front of them. they were not able to generate much pressure. Haynes King was pretty accurate in this game, and he had a monster game all the way around, 5 touchdowns overall, and took some major hits in this game. They let him do some serious work. And I think if you're Georgia, you got to be concerned about what a dual threat quarterback could do to you down the line, right? We saw it with what Jalen Milroe did to them, against when Alabama played them, right? Milroe in that game, he threw for 374 and also ran for 117. So these quarterbacks, playmaking quarterbacks can hurt them. We've seen it happen to them this year. And so I think that's what I'm on the lookout here for is, all right, this week, obviously they'll probably be in the playoff regardless of what happens. But if they can get the bye, that'll be great news for them. If they get to host a game, you're kind of wondering who's going to be coming to Sanford Stadium. Now, once again, at home, you feel pretty good about Georgia, right? Their 2 losses this year were road games. But still, I think questions should be asked of the Georgia Bulldogs about, hey, defensively, can they keep up? And then, can you keep Carson Beck consistent? Because his multi-interception games this year, his 3-pick games at least, they've won both of them, ironically. So they can overcome that, but you can't keep putting your defense in terrible spots over and over again. But your defense, has to look a little bit better than they have been. I think that's something that we have to talk about. We got to mention Texas too, 17-7, win over A&M. Just a workman performance. Quintravion Wisner, they really have made the effort to make him the guy. And we know there's been so much, them with the running back injuries and what's been going on. But this is a game where the offense did not look great, but their defense is just a beast when they need to be. They had 6 tackles for loss. They had 3 sacks. Marcel Reed, efficiency, is somewhat there, but 146 and interception on 23 attempts. It's not excellent. They only ran the ball for 3 yards a carry. Texas's defense can just absolutely wreck your day. They really have the guys up front to make life miserable. And you see, Vernon Broughton, he has been a beast for them all year, but, he's a senior, and this feels like this is the real breakout season for him, just with what he's been able to do this year and the size and the strength. At 6'4", 305, this guy is wrecking games. Alfred Collins, obviously, we know can wreck a game. Trey Moore has a big game with multiple tackles for loss. So they're able to use that pressure, able to get in the backfield. They're able to use a lot of their personnel and make things happen. And that's the one thing about this Texas team is that their defense can clamp you. They really can get after your ass. And that's what's made this team so fantastic. And that's what's made Sark's teams recently so good is their concerted effort on the defensive end. You go back to the Vanderbilt game, 24 points allowed, then 17 against Florida, 10 against Arkansas, 14 against Kentucky, 7 against A&M. The defense is nasty. Now, the offense left a little bit to be desired, but they're just not as explosive. They don't have the great running backs. They don't have the great wide receivers. They've got good wide receivers. They don't have the kind of freak athlete wide receivers that they have, right? Gunnar Helm is their leading guy in receptions this year, and obviously he plays tight end. Matthew Golden, the transfer they got from Houston, is another one of those guys who's 6 feet tall. Isaiah Bond, obviously not the tallest player in the world. He's not even 6 feet tall, right? DeAndre Moore for them, 6 feet tall. And I know we've seen Ryan Wingo out there some, right? He's played a little bit for them, but not a guy that they use at all much in that passing game. And so I think for them, what is he? Barely, really has not had a huge game this year. And so, just 2 touchdowns on the entire season for him. And he is the biggest guy they've got, but he hasn't had a big game since the UTSA game. Had a nice one against OU, but he hasn't scored since they played ULM. And, against Arkansas, not able to get a catch. So, I'm not sure if it's too late to incorporate him now, but it feels like Texas needs to do some more things with that offense. Once again, all these teams have flaws. It's positive for Texas. I like the way their defense is playing because a serious conversation would have had to happen if they lost that game. I think 100% that would have had to be the case. South Carolina, Lenora Sellers is just the most exciting player in college football. If you haven't seen the run, go check it out. The one where he turns left and then turns right. This guy is just elusive as they come. Was not perfect passing the ball. You need to take better care of the ball running, but 16 carries for 166 and 2 scores. He was a difference maker, and South Carolina has landed them a generational, potentially, quarterback for them. This guy, talent-wise, has the chance to be the best South Carolina quarterback of all time. I think if you think about the guys who went and played college, at South Carolina, like he's got a chance to be the best ever there because of his skill set, right? I think we think Connor Shaw is probably, the guy that we think about the most when we think about the quarterbacks there. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Well, at least the 21st century, he's going to have a chance to be the best one. Steven Garcia obviously had a great career. Ryan Helinski was pretty good, obviously. There wasn't a whole lot. Spencer Rattler, too, up there. But Spencer was not as big and not as fast. He had better arm, probably a much better passer for sure, yeah. But Spencer is not the overall athlete, escape artist that Lenora Sellers is. And he's so young, too. He's got a lot of room to work and improve. But we saw it against the Missouri game, the play where he escapes and makes that throw. You're like, oh, my God, this guy has got the it factor. He's got it in spades. So that was a really fun game. And South Carolina, maybe making a case. We got to see what happens this coming weekend between Clemson and SMU and, those games to figure out, hey, is an extra team getting in, whatnot. But you have that. Miami, Cam Ward gets let down. What a passing performance on the day for Kyle McCord. But Cam Ward, 25-36, 349, 2 scores. He has been so good all year, and the defense has always just let them down. And so it's sad to see a Cam Ward will not be in the playoff or not have a chance to make the playoff because of that, right? I just think that's not, he deserved a chance to go out there and do it. And then Iowa State gets a big win over K-State, right? And I know some interesting comments from Chris Kleiman about, hey, I know it's not the season that you want, but consecutive 8-win seasons in a row. And he's right. And I thought this might be the learning year for Avery Johnson. I know a lot of folks had a lot of hope for him, but this is his first full-time year as a starter. And so, he was 12 for 28 in this game, threw for 3 touchdowns, but threw for, 220. And so this was a game where their inefficiency passing-wise hurt them. Now, it wasn't like Rocco Becht, and Iowa State were a lot better, but it just, to me, like they're kind of coming around a little bit, right? It's going to take them a bit more time just to create that offense around him, to mold him into the player that they want him to be. And that's okay. Schools don't always have to be as good all the time. Matt Campbell had that team that was preseason top 5, top 10, whatever it was. They didn't end up too good. You know what? They got 10 wins this year, a few years later, right? So it can happen for you. All right, follow us on Twitter, @CCPodcastJN. I'm @JoshNeighbors_. Find the show wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Like the video, sub, all that stuff. Appreciate you all. We'll talk to you all mañana.
We are Rogue Media Sports.